Hello, Lee Robinson here from American Sentinel K9. The purpose of this video is to discuss selective breeding. Now, some of the topics in this video may be difficult for people to understand if they're dealing with a purebred line of dogs that are already established in type. When I was feeding the dogs, I was thinking about some of the game dogs that we work, and most breeders today that deal with game dogs, they just want to maintain the best that have created legacies and legends as far as their achievements go. But very few people that breed game dogs are really trying to improve what existed in those breeds. In fact, most of them would probably just be trying to maintain it. But if we look at history of the game dogs, their achievements are outstanding. And honestly, Malinois is probably the same way. They're just, if you find quality blood, have access to quality blood, most breeders that deal with those breeds are just trying to maintain the outstanding performance that those breeds have. So, they can just kind of operate on breeding the best to the best philosophy, and for the most part, it'll work fairly well. But the American Pit Bull Terrier, of course, it has some flaws in it for personal protection, but actually just working the dog and getting the dog to perform. If you're dealing with quality blood, your work's already done. You can turn those dogs on very quickly, and just a few obedience commands that's combined with bite work to let the dog know go into action, and you're just relying on the dog's genetics. But what if you have to build that from ground up? Now it's a whole nother ball game. And so here we're going to discuss how do you get a breed like the American Sentinel to perform at comparable levels as breeds like the American Pit Bull Terrier or the Malinois, and in some ways surpass them. If I thought those breeds were superior, I wouldn't have made this cross to begin with. Wouldn't have developed the breed to begin with. I saw flaws in those breeds that I wanted to improve on, and that's why my program is different than a person that just wants to maintain what's already there. So with that said, selective breeding, the first thing you need to do is learn about the steps of natural selection. There's 4 basic steps. The first step is overproduction of offspring. You're going to have to put pups on the ground. If you don't have pups on the ground, it's impossible to select the best of the population. Now, obviously, you can go out to the other programs that are out there and find the best dogs that are available to you and start with that. Overproduction of offspring has to be out there, and of course there is an overproduction of dogs out there. So go choose the ones that you can, and when you start looking around, you'll see the second step of natural selection, which is variation exists in the population. Now, some variants do better than others for certain goals. The third step is compete to serve. All right. Now, the reason why I say compete to serve is in nature, it's compete for limited resources. But in artificial selection, step 3 is different. Step 3 is compete to serve, because we're going to feed them. Who serve the best get bred. So the two processes are very similar. Natural selection, overproduction of offspring, genetic variation. Those who compete, they compete for resources, and the ones that win the resources are allowed to breed. In artificial selection, only the last 2 steps are different, and that's compete to serve, and then the winners are bred, because we provide their resources to them. All right, now the third thing you're going to need to do is have a specific goal. Now, this specific goal is very essential when you're going to do your competitive selection, compete to serve. Having a very specific goal is critical, because a jack of all trades is an expert of none. Now, our dogs are bred to be family companion guardians. That's our #1 goal. But there's limits on how far we can actually pressure a dog with protective scenarios, and so our second goal is more of just a test that is more demanding, physically more demanding, in terms of pain tolerance and endurance and agility and stamina, and that is to hog hunt. We use our dogs for hog catch work, and that's because it's an ethical venue where we can really see what these dogs are made of. All right, so and to do that, be specific. That will be important. Next, the people that start off with a program that's already established, or a breed that's already established, like the game bred American Pit Bull Terrier or a Malinois, may have a hard time understanding, excuse me here, why consistency of performance is so critical, and not only critical, but requires more from a breeder than what they're familiar with. Bottlenecking is like a funnel. There's a population out there with genetic variation, and what we're going to do is take all these different types, type A, type B, type C, and type D, or whatever types you're dealing with, and you're going to run them through a funnel, and they're not going to all be allowed to pass. At the end of this hole where the funnel is, it's like a screen, and you're only going to let certain individuals through. Well, when you do that, you're going to eliminate certain variants in the population, and that's going to produce the traits that you're going to work off of, the ones that make through. You have now selected the individuals that have created your founder population, your foundation. Now, it's real important to get enough of these quality traits up here that you're going to need in your population in order to maintain your population, but at the same time eliminate undesired. And this is going to take some generations of selective breeding to do this. It's your foundation, while it is the dogs you purchase and start with, a foundation can also be the dogs that you produce that become more prolific in your program, the individuals that you breed off of and really focus on. Like Preacher Man is one of our foundation dogs, okay? So he's a dog that we produce. We bought his parents, but we produced him because he had a lot of the traits that we're looking for. And I guarantee you that ASE's Scratch is going to be a phenomenal foundation dog, and so is ASE's Justice. Those dogs are just incredible dogs, okay? Next, genetic drift. Let's explain what genetic drift is. So now you have this population, your foundation that you're going to work with, and you're going to line breed and inbreed on it. And what you can do, if you actually want to look up the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium equation, you can look to see, are you making your desired traits more popular or less popular in your gene pool? Now, maybe you do, or maybe you don't know the alleles for those genes associated with those performance traits that you're looking for, but you can still kind of do something similar. Even if you don't know the exact alleles, you can still look at the frequency and the consistency within your program to find out, are you actually improving and making these desired traits more prolific and more consistent in your program? If you are, then you're headed the right direction. If you're not, you might want to step back and reassess your efforts and knowledge of the dogs that you're dealing with. Something else, sometimes the first generation works really well, and sometimes the second generation doesn't work so well, because the first generation you're combining the good of this one and the good of that one, but you're also combining the bad of this one with the bad of that one, and you get the offspring of that. But that first time, a lot of times things kind of click really well. Not always, but a lot of times they do. But then you take that F1 generation and breed it back with the F1 generation, and you're going to get a lot more genetic variation in that second generation. And so here, you kind of go back and start over again because you have to build and really screen out those undesired genes. All right? And this is genetic drift. Look up Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium equation. It's p squared plus 2pq plus q squared equals 1, and also p plus q equals 1 when you're dealing with a trait that is only controlled by 2 alleles. And when you're controlled by 3 alleles, you have to do p, q, r, but that's not the purpose of this video. All right, next, gene flow. Gene flow is different than genetic drift. Genetic drift is the changes of allelic frequency or trait frequency in your population based off of line breeding and inbreeding, basically. You're not having, in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, you're not having any outcrosses to other populations. In fact, there really shouldn't even be any selective pressures applied towards Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, but I don't want to get into that because you are going to have selective pressures because you're going to be selecting for desired traits. But gene flow is different. Gene flow says, okay, let's say now you build a population of individuals that have some traits that you want. You've done with some line breeding, you've done some inbreeding, and your hybrid vigor is decreased. Maybe your litter size is decreased as well. So what are you going to have to do now? Well, you're going to have to outcross to a dog that's from outside of your family to increase the hybrid vigor. And when you do that, I highly recommend that you assess your gene pool as best as you can Look for any weaknesses that you may have in your gene pool. And if you say you have none, I'm going to tell you either you're a liar or you're a fool. Now, the reason why I say that is I know some people that say they have perfect dogs. Perfection is unobtainable because you not always make them faster, stronger, better endurance, smarter. There's always ways to improve the dog. And if you can't find a way to improve the dog, then you're limited in your goals. Okay? If we learn about natural selection, we'll learn very quickly that perfect animals do not exist. Okay, you might think a stick bug is a perfect animal, but the environment changes and sticks change, and when those sticks change, that stick bug needs to adapt and respond to those changes. Otherwise, he's going to be left in the extinction gene pool. So you have to continually be able to evolve and progress. And so look at your population and find out what your weaknesses are in your gene pool, and if you are unable to see some, then step back, try to be more honest in your assessment. And something else is, if you can't find a weakness, look at the same question from a different perspective. And this is what I oftentimes have to do, because our dogs are pretty rock solid. So I have to ask a different question sometimes, and that is, what areas would I like to make better? All right, anything that you would like to be better, that's another way of just saying I've identified a weakness. It's not necessarily a weakness in the dog, but it's a weakness towards your goal, something that you want to improve. And obviously, one of the things that I like to improve in the American Sentinel K9 is I want to obtain not only a high degree of athleticism, a high ability to work effectively as a family companion, guardian, and a hog hunter, better endurance, better stamina, better power, always want more. Just like you're building a dragster for a strip. If you don't improve your car, you're going to end up losing someday when somebody else made improvements. All right, so you have to keep improving. One of my favorite things that I want to improve on is I always strive to add gameness into my dogs. So people can disagree with me on this, and some people believe that the American Pit Bull Terrier is the only game dog into existence. Wow. These people fail to acknowledge that the American Pit Bull Terrier was created by crossbreeding the Bulldog with the Terrier. You had two different breeds. The Bulldog wasn't really known to be game. The Terrier was, and the Terrier added gameness to the Bulldog. And they ended up creating the American Pit Bull Terrier, which is one of the gamest dogs on the planet, if not the gamest. The Patterdale Terrier, some people believe, surpasses it. I think the American Pit Bull Terrier is the apex, okay? So I'm interested in those genes, and those genes, they can be selected for, all right? How you select that, that's going to be up to you to decide. You're going to have to put the pressures and use your eye that you're comfortable with legally and also objectively and ethically. So I recommend that you stay within the confines of the law, just like we do. In observation, you remember events as they happen, okay? And you use that knowledge to make appropriate selections for where you're going to go from here. Now, when I need an outcross, I will outcross with a dog that has the traits that I want. All right, is that going to have all the traits that I want? No, it's not going to have all the traits that I want, because I may be outcrossing to someone else's program. And to be frank with you, I think our band dog program is the best in the world. Now, we have got some more proof to do. I need to get some evidence out of Scratch and some other young dogs and prospects that we've been working on. The last year and a half has been a little bit difficult for us because of injuries and setbacks and other projects that we've been working on. But our program is 20 years old, and there's not another program out there that has the amount of proof that our program has. When I do pursue an outcross, what I look for is an individual that is super solid in the areas that are most essential to me. If there's any weaknesses in those dogs, those weaknesses are not things that I'm concerned about in my program. For example, if I outcross to, let's say, a dog named Lucky 7. When I outcross to Lucky 7, I'm not worried about him being smaller because we have plenty of size in our dogs. But one of the improvements that we can do is not just improvements in traits, but improvement in consistency of those traits. So while we have a gene pool that displays all the traits that I want, maybe I want to improve the consistency. Or my dog Frankie Bump, he can come from a gene pool where those traits are basically locked in. That gene pool, I've got the genes in my gene pool, and I want to lock them in my gene pool. And then we go back after I produce that generation. I am Basically, that's what gene flow is. It's outcrossing. So, you know, you need to assess your programs, look for weaknesses, look for strengths, and when you outcross, make sure that your outcross is solid in whatever it is that you want to improve on. And if there are any weaknesses in that outcross, make sure your program is solid in its weakness. Like, I'm not worried about size, we got it. Anyway, those are a few thoughts. You take care. American Sentinel K9, have a blessed day.